host, Jason Malott, author of Adam is God, Eve is Us, Strange Stories About Aliens, Angels, and the Love of God from the book of Genesis. Hope you've gotten the book. If you haven't gotten the book yet, you should pick it up because I wrote it, so I think it's pretty good. No, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I definitely want to try and not retell, but try to explain the Bible, the book of Genesis, Christianity, in the way that I see it. And it's not necessarily the way that other people see it, but I'm okay with that. It's what I've learned over the 25 years of being a Christian from my studies. I've been a youth pastor, I've been an associate pastor, I went to college, I've done years and years of studying the Bible. I have a lot of information I know. And so I wanted to talk to you about it in this one. Plus, I got my next book coming out here really soon. It's Puppies and Napalm, The Extra-Dimensional Madness of the Prophets. This one, I'm really looking forward to. I put a lot of myself, my heart, my soul, and everything into this next book. I feel like it's very appropriate for right now, with everything going on. How important it is that we know the Bible, we know what the Bible teaches. I'm trying to move this to a better spot. Yeah. Okay, so then I can look at this and you can't tell I'm looking at it. I got my laptop right here. Just when I want to read my book. But there's a lot of things I talk about that I believe it's the better way. It's a way that we can fix the world. We can change things. We can make a difference as Christians. When we come together to do good, not to judge and, treat other people like they're different, not part of what we're doing, but becoming more inclusive and being a part of social change, not just the everyday norm of capitalism, of, how the United States works. It's like, as Christians, we can stop this and make a difference if we wanted to. I talk about this in my book. Another thing, just in case I get in trouble with copywriting, we're listening to one of my favorite albums. It's by the Proto Men. It's Act 2, Father of Death. If you like that, yeah, I have some questions I'd love to answer. I love Proto Men. They're very interesting. But I wanted to talk about first, just to get started here, I wanted to talk a little bit about my new book, because I just got finished doing the final edits, so it's kind of still fresh on my mind. But I wanted to read you my intro, and I wanted to read it just to, kind of show you the direction this book is going. And the introduction is called Puppies and Napalm with Jonah. And this is how it begins. Okay, I'm going to read it to you real quick. No fate. This 2-word warning carved into a wooden table somewhere between here and Mexico. Written by poet, mercenary, and mother of soon-to-be savior of humanity's future, Sarah Connor knew the future and knew we were already doomed. Skynet takes over, the machine seizes control, and the T-800 version of the Terminator becomes the governor of California. The future is quite interesting and sometimes not what we expect. Sort of like Jonah. That's kind of how I start the book out. I did the weird Terminator reference just to kind of, I want people to know this book's going to be weird. It's going to be different. And in my book, there's a lot of places where I'll say things and say, you're going to have to look it up because I want you to get the reference. And I do reference a lot of things. I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to write something that I liked. Not just something that I knew was the way you're supposed to write it, or, the proper way you should write it. I wanted to write it the way that I liked it. So my book has very in-depth Bible type study stuff, and it's also very artistic. I include some poetry in it. One of the first poems I actually have in here, let me go find that one. Here we go. The first one that I have in here is called When the Music Stopped Playing. Let me put this a little ways away so you can hear me. So it's called When the Music Stopped Playing. When the music stopped playing, In this silence, this resilience stayed me and played me out, wanting this fade to fade me out. When this ended, and I'm left here still staying, praying to find a reason, I prayed to change this change, ringing in my pockets, singing inside of me, of whom I am and cannot be. When the top is too far to see, and lying down still leaves me tired, so tired, to not try this last try, and tire out this music, this song so smoothly pouring on, tired of trying to sing today. Today is fading when the music stopped playing. That's one of the first poems I have in there, so you got a little special secret preview, sneak preview of my book. But yeah, I all through the book I have poems and other pop reference cultural things, pop cultural reference things. One of my chapters actually I have a ton of horror film references because 80s horror films, well 80s and 90s. I write the whole chapter kind of from the concept that Christians have stolen their ideas of hell from horror films. And I have a chapter where I talk about Alexander the Great, but I compare him to Donald Trump. And it's, we're making things great again. This doesn't mean that. I have a chapter that I talk about Hunter S. Thompson, one of my favorite writers, and kind of compare him to Ezekiel, the prophet, in the way that they both kind of have the same kind of writing style, that whole gonzo reporting kind of style. And let me see, I'm going to pull up my chapters here. And my Amos chapter, where I talk about social justice and that Christians should be at the front of the line when it comes to social justice issues. These are all things that I talk about, and I'm all over the place. Talk about mental health. I got a whole chapter. It's about Elijah, and it's dealing with mental health issues. And that's something that is very important to me for a lot of reasons, but one of the stories that I tell in there is I was going to a church in Madeira, and there was a lady a husband and wife sat behind me. The husband was like a deacon in the church, and the wife was always in the back, older lady, always singing, clapping her hands, always in a great mood. And I saw her there every Sunday, and I always talked to her about my work, about life in general, whatever. And one week she wasn't there because she killed herself. That blew my mind. How can somebody who's a Christian do that? And it made me realize that mental health is a serious issue that really... sorry, my battery just went low battery on me. Mental health was the issue that definitely should be talked about. And I have a whole chapter I dedicated to it where I talk about the mental health issues in the Christian church. I talk about that experience I had. I talk about one of my favorite Newsboys songs. It's called L.E.G. And it was written basically after a famous producer in the Christian world back in the 90s, it was in the 90s, had killed himself. And it really shook up a lot of the Christian artists of the time. And Newsboys, they were the ones who wrote the song, said that they wrote it about him as well as Kurt Cobain, just kind of as a, going through that whole, how can somebody kill themselves? Especially, in the situation with their friend who was a producer, how can a Christian do that? And I kind of use that as the background when I'm telling my story here in this chapter. But the point of it is that, yeah, it's a serious issue that the church needs to deal with, and we can't just ignore it any longer. There are a lot of people hurting that sit in the pews every Sunday acting like everything's okay, and it's not. Oscar Wilde said something I thought that was really kind of interesting once. Oscar Wilde, Importance of Being Earnest, wrote that play, wrote the Portrait of Dorian Gray. Very amazing writer back in the 1800s, I think. Late 1800s, early 1900s, probably late 1800s. I should look that up. I don't want to say something and then I'm like, wait a second, I haven't even thought about Oscar Wilde in so long, so I would normally have this ready, but I don't. Oscar Wilde was, so 1800s, middle 1800s to late 1800s. he said, when you talk to somebody, they'll ask you, where do you work? What's your career? Who you married to, your kids, like they have a laundry list of all these things, when really the most important thing they should probably ask you is, are you happy? I think that's an amazing quote, because it's very true. I think the most important question sometimes we could ask people is, are they happy? How are you doing? Are you okay? I mean, who cares where they work? Who cares what the weather is? I mean, we all can look outside. I mean, it's nice out here today. That's why I'm actually sitting in my backyard, just because it was so nice out. I wanted to be in my backyard. But yeah, that's it. I write a whole chapter about it, my mental health chapter. It's talking about Elijah and how Elijah struggled with mental health issues. A lot of people don't know that. You got to read my chapter to find out about it, because I'm not going to give up anymore. One of my other fun chapters that I wrote, and a lot of this were just things that I found so interesting. Weird things as well. All these things have weird things, but this thing is a little different. It's called Talking in Tongues with the Prophet Joel. My book is based upon the prophets. Like, each chapter is another prophet that I talk about. And I talk about all the prophets. I mean, as many as I could squeeze in there. If I missed a few, they're kind of the low, kind of lying, like extra prophets. But I try to cover as much as I can. Even got women prophets in here. That's how. I mean, I tried to get everything. But Joel is one of those prophets that Pentecostals, and Pentecostals are the group of Christians, denomination Christians, that like to, usually like to do this thing called, speaking in tongues, where they're either praying or worshiping God in another language that doesn't make sense. They also like to usually dance around or roll on the floor. People pray for them, they fall over, they shake around. They're a fun group. I'll be honest with you, I learned to appreciate the Pentecostals a lot more than anybody else when I could step away from the whole religious thing. If God is real and he can do all these awesome things that you're saying he can do, the response should be nothing but what Pentecostals do. Why are you not jumping around? Why are you not rolling on the floor and shaking like a crazy person? I mean, come on, and that's, and so as I got rid of religion and decided I was going to step away from that and just look at God in the most pure way possible, I always had an affinity with Pentecostals. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I love a lot of their culture. I love a lot of the way that they look at things. And I also despise a lot of the things that they do. And when I say despise, I absolutely am disgusted by a lot of things. But there's a lot of things in other churches I can say the same thing. I'm able to take the good and leave the bad out. I'm not going to... I expect that Pentecostals are human just like anybody else is human. And I will always allow room for somebody to be human. And in that, I can appreciate the good things. And I can appreciate the screaming and yelling and running all over the place like a crazy person. Because if you really believed that God could heal you of anything, if you really believed that God would bless you and take care of all of your needs, if you really believe that God saved you from this horrible place that you could have been tormented for all eternity and he's now giving you up, of course the response should be Pentecostal. I mean, how many concerts? I mean, I grew up in the 90s concert, before it was what it is today. Especially the punk rock scene, especially the Christian punk rock scene. You want to get as raw and as real as possible. Oh my gosh. Just people like moshing for fun, It was weird and different, but people were excited. And I think that's what I'm saying. I think the proper response in a lot of ways to God's goodness is that, but that's my opinion. You don't have to share that opinion. You can think it's the weirdest thing in the world, and I'm okay with that. But you've got to respect the fact that there's a lot of weird things in the Bible. A lot of weird things. And that whole thing is just one of them. Not the only one. I mean, our religion's based upon the fact that a first century Jewish guy got beat to death and hung on a cross. And our whole, everything we believe is based upon some first century Jewish guy getting beat up and hung on a cross. We believe he rose from the dead. I mean, you're already in crazy land. I mean, you might as well just accept it at this point. Embrace it. You're there. If you believe that a man dying on a first century Palestinian Jew dying on a cross and raising from the dead, you believe that, you're already in crazy country. So forget about the rest. Just jump in, swim. The water's nice, 80 degrees. You might as well. Because I'll tell you what, is when you try to rationalize everything, there was Augustine was a church father, and if you know who Augustine was, then you can understand my I don't know the proper way to, in just a few sentences, describe it. And let me just say he was a very interesting church father who went from being a purveyor of prostitutes and having a kid with them to being a church father, and a big change in his life. And I guess the thing that always stuck out about Augustine to me was that he couldn't let go of the logic part of it. He always tried to water down the weird stuff in the Bible to try to explain it away, to make it more palatable for his his Greek logic friends, make it more palatable for them. He was one of the church fathers. Give me a second. I just want to make sure on this fact. I don't want to say something. He was one of the church fathers that tried to basically made it illegal to interpret Genesis 6 as being a story about human and angelic relationships. He didn't like that. He said it was too weird. So he made it illegal. He's like, no, I don't want Christianity to be this weird, strange thing, even though it already was. It's based upon the Jewish. I mean, already, they had Judaism that was already established, and it had some really crazy things it believed. So, yeah, it's weird. It's weird to believe that a first century Palestinian Jewish guy being beaten and hung on a cross makes it possible for me today to enjoy heaven on earth. That's crazy. But I believe it. So guess what? Anything else I believe, it doesn't really matter. It's like I'm already there. So, and I believe a lot of interesting things, I think. I think they're interesting. I think they're kind of weird. I think they're kind of crazy. But I've always had a thing for Pentecostals, and I have no problem with speaking in tongues. Myself, I've spoken in tongues my whole life. I tell a story about how the first time I spoke in tongues, I tell the story about how it felt, and I talk about it not from a perspective of somebody who's just, I was raised this way, so this is normal to me. I come at it from a perspective of a religious, not religious. I'm going to say not religious. But I come at it from having the spiritual experience, this world-changing spiritual experience that, I can't come back from it. I can't say that it didn't happen. And it's been something that I have used in my life. Most of my whole Christian world I've lived in. I've utilized it, whether people believe it or not. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care what other people believe. I believe a lot of things other people don't believe, and I'm okay with that. So in this chapter, I put in all the different scriptures that talk about, praying in tongues and speaking in tongues, and Paul's ideas behind it, and the apostles' ideas behind it, and then I tell the stories. I dealt with the good and the bad of the church. I've seen some amazing things. I've experienced amazing things in the church. I've seen people's lives changed. I've seen people go from being, hardened criminals and drug addicts to becoming cleaned up, normal, going back into being good people instead of trying to rip people off or try to exploit people or take advantage of people. I saw a lot of really good changes. I also saw a lot of bad things. But like I said in the beginning, I could take the good, forget the bad, but I can't ignore it. And I got to speak up against it. And that's something that I speak about here in this chapter. I saw the nasty backside of Christianity, and it's kind of hard to unsee it after you see it. And I know some of you probably have, because, everybody has had their their experiences in church where it led them down a path of either believing, not believing, becoming what they are today. And I feel like the things that I experienced brought me to where I am. And I've had a lot of really positive experiences, but I've also seen a lot of negative. And a lot of the negative has really pushed me away from what you call the building churches. Because I've just seen a lot of negative. I've seen a lot of, I don't want to say toxic, but you kind of have to say it because it kind of is. Shoulders hurt. I worked out yesterday. Oh, I work out usually every day, but yesterday I worked my shoulders. Sucked. I did this workout that I literally feel like I'm holding weight on my shoulders, even though I'm just sitting here. It's crazy. But yeah, the thing with the church is that I have not found peace in a building church, and I've been looking for a long time. That's just me. I don't feel like going to a building is a necessary part of Christianity, though it's important, having a group of people you can get together with. But this is one of the reasons that some of the things that I experience and some of the things I still experience and still see is one of the main reasons I don't have much to do with the building church. I wish to be a part of it. I wish to be someone who has a voice in it, but I just don't think they want to hear my voice right now. Maybe someday. I mean, that's why I mean, having this book, I mean, the thing that's really neat about it is it's always going to be there. If I'm dead, this book is still going to be around. It's going to be in a library somewhere or something. Somebody might read it and go, oh, wow, that's crazy. That's some weird stuff. And hopefully in the process of reading the weird stuff, they get the point of what I'm trying to say. In my next chapter, because I kind of go... There is a flow here, and once you read the book, you're going to see it. But my next chapter is called Hosea Doesn't Like Raisin Cakes. And this is a chapter that was, I would say also was a labor of love. It was something that meant something to me. All through the Bible, we see this adversarial relationship between Baal and God. That there's always been this struggle, to the point that a lot of the Old Testament, it's almost like it's a polemic. It's an answer to Baal. That there'll be things that'll happen in the Old Testament that's kind of like, well, you said Baal did this, but actually it was Yahweh, it was God who did this. So you see that, and I tell the story. I mean, I start, with Moses and his whole interaction at Baal Zepon, where God parted the Red Sea and destroyed Pharaoh's army right in front of the Baal there at the Red Sea. And then you have Elijah and the Mount Carmel. And you have the whole story of the Baal there and the prophets of Baal. And, they had the whole... Oops, my phone is dying, so I might have to cut this off a lot quicker. But in the story of Elijah with the prophets of Baal, they had a God versus God showdown where they both prepared a sacrifice, and the God who answers by fire, let him be God. Well, the story... Yahweh answered by fire and burned up the offering, and they got rid of the prophets of Baal after that. But there was one more time where God wanted to finish the work, and this was actually on this is during the ministry of Jesus. It's right outside of Caesarea Philippi. I might be saying it wrong. But basically, you had, in this area, you had a mountain, you had a cave. And a lot of people say it's Mount Hermon, which I think it was because of the geographical setup. Mount Hermon has a very, very important history, especially to the Jewish people, because they believed, because it was in some of the extra biblical writings, like the Book of Enoch, and the whole concept of Mount Hermon was where these watchers, they call them watchers, they were sons of God, or Elohim. These spiritual beings came down and reproduced with human women. And it talks about it in Genesis 6, but this story goes a little more depth into it. And it says that they came down on Mount Hermon. Now what's interesting is on Mount Hermon, there's a cave that they refer to it as the Gates of Hell. And it's where Pan worship at the time of Jesus was taking place. But it also was well known as being an ancient altar of Baal. So it says Jesus goes up to the top of this mountain. This mountain that was well known as being an evil mountain, where evil spiritual beings came down to bring evil on the earth, where giants had always lived and abided in some way, shape, or form, and God had always sent people to take them out. And you have Jesus showing up on this mountain, and it says 2 people are there with him. He transfigures in front of, James and John, Peter, James, and John. He transfigures. You can try to explain that. I mean, go ahead. If I even told you and got into the Greek and you don't even, it's mind blowing. That word to the Christian vernacular is very hard to, describe a person transfiguring, displaying their, like literally becoming God right there. And then in the presence, Jesus transfiguring on this mountain. Moses and Elijah are there. Now I want you to think about this. Moses, remember, beats Baal back the Red Sea. Baal's the pond. Elijah, remember, the showdown with the prophets of Baal. So Moses beat Baal. Elijah beat Baal. The law, the prophets. And then you have Jesus. And then I love what it says, that when the apostles looked up at him, it says that he turned to them and no one else was there but Jesus. He was the end of it. He was the final nail into the coffin of Baal. And you never hear about Baal again. Never hear about Baal again. Baal is done. Baal is defeated. And so I talk about one of the things that I thought was interesting is that the way they used to worship Baal was they would make raisin cakes. And so the reason why I named it Hosea doesn't like raisin cakes. I always talk about why do people put raisins in cinnamon rolls? I mean, I have another reason not to like raisins in cinnamon rolls. It's for worship of Baal. If you put raisins in your cinnamon rolls, you're worshiping Baal. No, but yeah, I talk this whole chapter. I go into that whole battle between God and Baal, and Jesus finally finishing the battle on Mount Hermon. And I love how he finishes that whole story when he says, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "You're the Christ, you're the Son of God." And he says, that confession, the gates of Hades, the physical, I'm pointing at them right now because they're right here in front of us, this cave where they did pan worship, the gates of Hades will not prevail. Will not prevail. And so there was something very physical and very real that the disciples were experiencing there. That they saw it. They experienced it. They were in this city that was definitely not for little Jewish boys. I'll tell you that. And if you look up pan worship, you'll understand why. But there they were. And there they were with Jesus. Jesus defeating Baal once forever and becoming transfigured. Yeah, trip on that. I'll be honest with you, I ain't going to touch that one. Because anything that you say is going to sound blasphemous, but it's absolutely 100% mind-blowing. That Jesus, the man, transfigured in front of his disciples, and Moses and Elijah appeared on that mountain. And that's the thing I think that people trip out on the fact that maybe, the fact that God became a man, but I think it's more trippy to think that a man is sitting on the throne of God right now. Think about that one. The Bible says Jesus is on the throne, and Jesus is a man. He never stopped being man. Man is human. It's part of his nature now. It's who he is. He is the eternal God-man. And I don't want to get into that because that's just some weird, deep, trippy doctrine stuff. And get it. So let me get it. So, chapter 11 is gonna be where it gets a little interesting, and this is where I talk about Daniel, a really interesting prophet in the Bible. But it's the name of the chapter is Daniel Warned Us About Aliens. I'd love to talk about this one, but I'm not going to. I'll leave you with that today. I'll talk about it next time. I gotta finish up. It looks like my battery is going to die. So thank you for tuning in today and listening to another live. I might not be answering your questions because I am still trying to figure out how to work that. So if I didn't answer your question, I'm sorry. I'll probably see it on a playback. But if you do have any questions, make sure you send them my way. I'd love to answer them. Anything you want to ask about, you want to talk about. And thanks for tuning in again. And catch you again probably in a week when I do another one of these. Thank you very much.